Hey everyone, it's Todd the Cybertruck Truck Guy, and today I want to talk about the recent Tesla earnings call that I think revealed some very interesting things as it relates to the Cybertruck. So today I'm going to talk about three obvious things that were revealed in the conference call. Then I'm going to talk about three not so obvious things that were revealed in the conference call. And lastly, I want to talk about three themes that I think are very important for the Cybertruck as we move towards actual Cybertruck production and delivery later on this year. Okay, so the first thing we have to recognize is that there was actually a relatively small amount of time dedicated to talking specifically about the Cybertruck. So let's go ahead and listen to that clip right here.
Where are you in Cybertruck development? What are your expectations for Cybertruck deliveries in 2021?
Right, so we finished almost all of the Cybertruck engineering. So we're no longer iterating at the design center level or design level. We've got the design is fixed. We're getting to, we'll soon order the equipment necessary to make the Cybertruck work. We're actually going to be using even bigger casting machines for the rear body of the Cybertruck because you've got, obviously, it's a bigger vehicle and you've got a long truck bed that's going to support a lot of load. So we'll be using an 8,000-ton casting press for the rear body casting as opposed to a 6,000-ton for Model Y. So 6,000 ton was the biggest casting press in the world. 8,000 ton, obviously, quite a bit bigger than that. And I think it's going to be an incredible vehicle. If we get lucky, we'll be able to do a few deliveries towards the end of this year. But I expect volume production to be in 2022.
Okay, so what does that tell us, or what does it actually confirm? Obvious stuff about the Cybertruck. Well, number one, it confirms that we're expecting the first production to actually be delivered this year. We've heard some rumors that the first Cybertrucks wouldn't actually be delivered until 2022. And while that's still a possibility based on where things sit today, and we're now well into construction at the Giga Texas plant, it looks very promising that we are going to have at least some Cybertrucks getting delivered later this year. Obvious fact number two is that the design phase is over. So that hopefully means we'll be getting some significant updates, both maybe images and hopefully some specification updates of things that we've been wondering about for a long time, like whether or not there'll be any kind of pass-through on the cab, or whether or not there'll be any kind of HVAC controls in the bed. Hopefully we'll start to see some real firm updates coming out now that the design part is actually really done. Obvious point number three is that they really are going to be using those Giga Casting machines in order to make the Cybertruck. Elon mentioned that it would be much larger than the casting machines they're using for the Model Y, and that has been a question that's popped up. How is the casting going to complement the actual exoskeleton? So hopefully we're going to see a little more transparency about that process as we actually get closer to building the first Cybertrucks. Okay, so now here's the three things that are not so obvious that came about in the conference call. This is primarily driven by the refresh of the Model S and the Model X. So not so obvious point number one, it looks like the steering yoke is a real thing. They're actually rolling it out with the Model S and Model X as the steering wheel. So even though everyone hypothesized that for whatever reason, whether it was illegal or impractical, there wasn't going to be the steering yoke that was originally revealed in the Cybertruck, it now looks like at least that's going to be a viable option. I also think sort of interesting alongside that is Tesla actually submitted a NTSA safety briefing asking about clarity on using peripheral control devices. And they asked about using phones or joysticks or other peripheral control devices that might be allowed once we sort of get to the next level of autonomous driving. And I think that we're headed for some innovative control surfaces, which brings me around to the big, not so obvious thing, which is torque vectoring. So if you've been watching this channel for a while, or some of the videos I've done specifically about the potential of using torque vectoring to achieve something like the Rivian tank turn, this is the first detail that we have. And I think when you combine that with the Yoke and the implementation of maybe some new types of control devices, I think we really are looking at Tesla's answer to the tank turn or the four-wheel steering that the Hummer EV has. So this is exciting. I think we're really looking at a chance that we're going to be getting some revolutionary control options combined with revolutionary steering options using torque vectoring. So if you don't know what torque vectoring is, basically it's the ability to turn the tires at different speeds. And in one of my early videos where I hypothesized about this, I mentioned that at least on the tri-motor, you should be able to do something similar to a Rivian tank turn by simply counter-rotating the rear tires. Now again, this is specifically mentioned with the tri-motor version of the Model S refresh of the Plaid upgrade with the 3 motors. So torque vectoring is only mentioned with the Plaid and Plaid Plus, which makes me believe that what they're really looking for in torque vectoring isn't just where one wheel rotates while the other one stays unrotated, but actually the first step at giving us counter-rotating tires on the rear. And we'll see what they're going to do with torque vectoring with perhaps a dual motor variant, but at least this is an indication that torque vectoring is a reality. It's something Tesla's thinking about, and I think it bodes very well for some very innovative turning options, especially at low speed for the Tesla Cybertruck. And not so obvious, point number 3, is that the Cybertruck is a hell of a value proposition. The Plaid Model S and the Plaid Model X are the first time Tesla's introduced a 3-motor variant. And those are both at 119 or 129,000. What it looks to me like is when you look at the cost of the lowest tri-motor Model S, compare that to the tri-motor Cybertruck, it's half the cost. So that tells us that the cost savings that Sandy Munro hypothesized, the cost that hypothetically Sandy Munro talked about, are going to be as dramatic as he was saying, in that you're going to get a powertrain and a platform for a vehicle that is $119,000, and you're only going to pay $69,000 for that vehicle. So that tells me that the savings they're getting from the casting, the stainless steel, the no painting, the simplified interior, those all are dramatic. And that also tells me that Cybertruck, or any design similar to the Cybertruck, is going to have very strong competitive and pricing advantages in the marketplace. And these are some of the reasons why I think the Cybertruck is ultimately going to become the #1 best-selling electric truck. But that's for another video. So that brings us to the 3 themes. And I think these are very important to us Cybertruck reservation holders as it relates to how we could see things unfolding over the next 1 to 2 years. Theme number 1, Tesla still lies. If you've watched some of the videos that Sandy Munro has either produced or some of the interviews he's done, he talks about Tesla lying. In other words, Tesla understating or almost intentionally puts out signals that says it's not working on something or it's not trying to do something, and then all of a sudden it shows up unexpectedly in the design of the vehicle. One of the things I think is interesting is about a year ago, Tesla basically came out and said, we're not really taking the Model X or Model Y refresh that seriously. We're not putting a bunch of energy into making it any of our signature products. In fact, Elon said they're manufacturing the X and the Y more for nostalgia. Obviously, that's BS. We know that now. Now, the question is, was it BS then, or has it only become BS after the emergence of seemingly very capable competitors like Lucid and the new Porsche? And I don't know the answer, but that leads me to theme number 2. Competition is good. One of the things that I really like is that suddenly now with the Model S, they're starting to put out torque numbers, and they're putting out specs that are clearly targeted at beating their competitors. Now, in this case, it's the Model S beating the Lucid Air in terms of range, acceleration, but also torque. And I think that it bodes really well. And I think that the torque vectoring is out there intentionally compete against Rivian and the Hummer. I think it's pretty obvious that torque vectoring is meant to be a big deal. They don't have a bunch of description around the Model S. And when you look at it and you look at the fact that they mention torque vectoring as one of the very few features that sort of define it, it's a big deal. And I think that's specifically in response to the Rivian tank turn and the Hummer EV's four-wheel steering. I think they can see that the competition in certain markets is going to use these innovative steering methodologies as a competitive advantage. So competition is good because it's driving Tesla to innovate, to differentiate, and outcompete them. And frankly, I love it. And lastly, theme number 3, it's all about the batteries. And for this one to make sense, I got to go to one of my infamous spreadsheets, but I think it will help illustrate the point much better. Bear with me. It's been a while since we've done a spreadsheet, and this isn't really a spreadsheet, it's more of a graph, but I was trying to come up with a way to visually demonstrate how powerful this is. But one of the things I noticed when I was actually going through the conference call is how almost every question revolved around one of two themes, either battery production or autonomy. And I started thinking about the battery production. And so the first thing is that if you're not in the first 20,000 Cybertruck reservation holders, the biggest constraint on when you're going to get your Cybertruck is battery production. And the second thing is that it's very hard to conceptualize exactly how revolutionary Tesla's ongoing battery efforts are going to be. So I was trying to come up with a way to demonstrate that, and I came up here with a simple graph to make it easy to understand. And I actually texted to Jordan over at the Limiting Factor a couple of things to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting something. So here's what you see. This is gigawatt hours of production over here. And this is if Tesla was only putting their batteries into cars, no storage at all, cars only. And the average kilowatt hour battery size is 75. So I don't know exactly where it comes in at. Could be 75, it could be 80. It's probably somewhere in that range. And I am speculating some here based on available information that's out there because they don't exactly tell us precisely how much battery production they're generating in the different locations. But we're going to go with this because I think it's close enough. So if you look at 2020, you can see here that, again, in 2020, their auto production was around 500,000. And if you back out what they actually used for energy storage, this is pretty close. When they start talking about 30 or 50 or 100 gigawatt hours, those numbers are a little hard to mentally track with. So what I did was I put that alongside here so that as we go up, as the production ramps start to take hold, you'll see the impact of what that is. 2020, that's about right. We're expecting Giga Nevada and China to both produce more batteries next year than they did this year. Now that's coming from CATL in China, as far as I know. Giga Nevada is now using more efficient batteries, so I'm assuming a slight increased production there. And the pilot line at Cato Road is going to be up and running. Now, this is probably a little optimistic. It's probably not going to be fully operational by maybe June, so maybe it should be 6 gigawatt hours instead of 10, but close enough for spitting distance. Important thing to keep in mind here is that the Cato Road pilot facility is worth about 1/3 of what Giga Nevada can produce, which is kind of mind-blowing because if you remember, the Cato Road facility is like in a 50,000 square foot building. It's tiny, tiny building, relatively speaking. This is massive. When the real magic starts to happen is over in 2022. I expect to continue to get incremental gains in Giga Nevada, and China will incrementally grow the following year. I didn't have Cato Road producing anymore in 2022, but let's just see what happens. I actually have to start zooming out here. So you see here that we get 30% of production. Now, in the earnings call, what Elon said is he expects to have both they didn't actually identify where the new battery cell production lines are going. I am assuming one is going to Austin and the other one's going to Berlin. And what he said is he expects them to be able to produce about 30% of their ultimate capacity in 2022. At one point, he said 30%. At another point, he said 100 gigawatt hours. So I'm going to go with the more conservative number and say that both plants are going to produce 30% of their 100 gigawatt hour capacity in 2022 using Elon's most conservative estimate there. So now you start to see, wow, at 130 gigawatt hours, we're able to put in batteries for 1.7 million cars. So look at the jump in that year with just some incremental growth in China and Giga Nevada, but with these two cell lines coming online. And now what's most impressive is if I zoom out so we can look at 2023, I have to keep zooming. Okay, there we go. So I'm not even sure if that shows up. Yeah, you can see it in there. You won't be able to read it from here, but this is what it looks like when they're fully ramped. And I'm also assuming that they begin the third production line in China. So I'm making the assumption that since they continue to expand their relationship with Panasonic and they continue to use that kind of an all of above approach, that the third line is going to be in China, and that they begin building that after they've begun scaling the other two. You can see here that ultimately we're at 315 gigawatt hours of production, which will be able to let them produce about 4.2 million vehicles. So we're going from a basis here of 500,000 to 4.2 million in just 3 years. Now, why that's important is that it's not going to be that many vehicles, right? As more excess capacity comes online, the Cybertruck is going to be able to get scaled quickly, and the Tesla Semi is going to be able to be built, and it's going to loosen up a lot of the battery constraints for doing other parts of the business. But as far as I know, I haven't seen anybody spell it out like this, because I think when I finally actually put it all together, I realized that what's going to allow us to get our Cybertrucks in the 2022 and 2023 timeframe is all of this cell production coming online, because then it's not a big deal if you're putting 125 or 150 or 200 kilowatt hour packs in Cybertruck, and you're doing 600 or 800 kilowatt hour packs in semis, and you're doing more storage. There's going to be plenty of capacity. And obviously, if I continue to build this out, you start to see how a gigawatt hour adding 100 or 200 or 300 gigawatt hours, what that ultimately means in terms of their production capability. And you also understand why they only could make and sell 500,000 vehicles, because that's all the batteries they had this year. They didn't have any more. This is where the real magic comes in line, 2022. And that's where we really should expect to see some loosening on battery supply just in time for us to get our Cybertrucks. That's it for my key takeaways from this earnings call. And please consider liking and subscribing, helping the channel grow. That would mean a lot to me. Other than that, we'll catch you next time. Bye.